Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're skipping all the heavy, abstract philosophy and diving straight into the actual, true stories of how people play the game of life. We're talking real players on the field, starting with a game of make-believe that turned out to be incredibly dangerous.
Now, these incredible stories come straight out of Florence Scovel Shinn's classic text. Her core premise is absolutely fascinating. Life isn't a battle at all. It's actually a game. And like any game, the absolute best way to learn the rules is by watching the players who are out there actively making moves, scoring big, or, making some pretty critical errors.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Playing Make-Believe. So, picture this. There was a woman who, back when she was just a kid, used to play this very specific, kind of strange game of make-believe. She'd constantly dress up in black clothes, throw on this long, sweeping black veil, and walk around pretending to be a widow. And at the time, all the adults around her thought was just this clever, amusing little act.
But here is where the game violently catches up to reality. Years later, she grew up and married a man she deeply, truly loved. But tragically, he died shortly after. And suddenly, she found herself wearing that exact same black sweeping veil for many years. Only this time, it was for real. The absolutely crucial takeaway here? The mind honestly doesn't have a sense of humor about these things. It simply takes whatever picture you give it and carries it out in the minutest detail, totally regardless of the havoc it might create.
And we see this exact same thing happen in another cautionary tale about careless words. There was this wealthy woman, beautiful home, plenty of money, but she frequently got tired of managing her household. She'd complain and repeatedly joke, "I'm just so sick and tired of things, I wish I lived in a trunk." Well, eventually her circumstances shifted dramatically. She literally spoke herself right into a life of poverty and ended up actually living out of that very trunk. She joked herself right into a totally unhappy reality.
Moving right along to Section 2, Acting the Part of Wealth.
Okay, this is a wild one. A man desperately wanted this luxury fur-lined overcoat that cost $500. The problem? He only had about $700 to his entire name. So obviously his logical, reasoning mind is screaming at him that he absolutely cannot afford to blow nearly all his money on a coat. But his intuitive mind gave him a totally different message. He actually turned to his wife and said, "If I get this coat, I'll make a ton of money."
So he completely ignores logic and spends almost all of his cash on this coat, purely to feel rich. And guess what? About a month later, this wild investment paid off with a massive $10,000 commission. The coat literally made him feel so prosperous that it linked him directly to success. If he hadn't acted the part and bought that coat, he never would have gotten that massive payoff.
Let's see what happens when you follow your gut in Section 3, Following the $8 Hunch. Imagine you're completely stranded in a distant city. You're facing total lack and limitation. You look in your wallet and you find exactly $8. That was the grim reality for one woman. That $8 was the exact amount she needed for car fare to get back home, and she didn't have a single penny more.
Now, her intellect is telling her she should probably stay in the city, try to find some work, and make some survival money. Instead, she had this sudden intuition, a completely, totally illogical hunch to just go home. She followed that hunch, spent her last $8 on the fare, and immediately bumped into an old family friend the second she returned. Through that friend, she miraculously received thousands of dollars. She was so thrilled by how it played out that she would constantly tell people, "Tell them about the woman who came to you with $8 and a hunch."
Which brings us to a really fascinating strategy in Section 4, Profiting from Divine Mistakes. So, there was a woman who was owed $2,000 by a relative. But out of nowhere, the relative dies without leaving the money in her will. And as if losing $2,000 wasn't bad enough, she then faces this total cascade of new disasters. Her landlord abruptly breaks her apartment lease and then immediately raises her rent. It genuinely looked like complete and total defeat. But here is the crazy part. She absolutely refused to panic, get angry, or resist the situation. Instead, she decided to bless the landlord and simply wait, claiming that she couldn't lose what was rightfully hers. And this brilliantly shows us the mechanics of the game. Because she refused to react with fear, the landlord made a miraculous, let's call it a divine mistake, when drawing up the new, more expensive lease. He completely forgot to include the standard 90-day eviction clause. Fast forward a little bit, and suddenly the landlord desperately needs to sell the building. But he couldn't do it. Why? Because she legally held the lease without that eviction clause. They desperately needed her to move out so the sale could go through.
So the agent comes over to negotiate a buyout. She holds her ground, and finally they write her a check to vacate. Want to guess the amount? Exactly $2,000. The precise amount she had originally lost from her relative, completely recovered through a landlord's careless mistake.
All of this brings us to Section 5, your next move.
So, what does this all mean for us? The absolute crucial point here is that life isn't a battle of logic or reason or struggling against impossible odds. It's a highly responsive game of giving and receiving. Whether you are spending your last few dollars on a random hunch, buying a ridiculously expensive coat just to feel wealthy, or holding your ground on a broken lease with a completely calm attitude, your outer reality is simply catching up to your inner picture.
Scovel Shinn calls the imagination the scissors of the mind. It's constantly, quietly cutting out your future, day by day, just like that little girl with the widow's veil. So, having seen how the game is actually played by real people on the field, I want to leave you with this one question. What are you playing make-believe with right now? Because ready or not, the payout is coming. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.